So out of all of the superheroes in the world that we know of, my favorite is Spider-Man. He has always been my favorite. I've grown up on his movies and video games. And something I haven't delved into Spider-Man wise is the comic books, which we'll be learning today due to this amazing video by Alex Lennon called The Entire History of Spider-Man in 70 Minutes. Now, we watched the Batman video. I had a great time doing that. You guys enjoyed it too. And some of you guys in the comment section of that video told me to check out the Spider-Man one. And I've already told you guys how big of a fan of Spider-Man I am. I mean, compared to the other superheroes out there, I mean, we've seen super strength, super speed, but never anyone that has spider powers. That's unique to me. And on top of that, Spider-Man's funny, he's smart, and he's kind of a loser like me, right? I just really love him, man. He's super relatable. So hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Please check out Alex's videos. He puts so much work into these. So please head over to his channel, subscribe, hit the like button on his videos also. And let's just jump into it, guys. The entire history of Spider-Man in 70 minutes. Okay, so all of Alex's links will be in the description down below. Let's start the video.
Ever wanted to learn the entire history of Spider-Man from the comics, but you're either too poor, can't be arsed to read the wiki, or just hate Watch Mojo with your very soul? To see the journey...
People hate Watch Mojo just so much, huh? I need to watch their videos just out of curiosity to see why. Maybe there was some controversy in the past or something, or maybe their videos are just rushed and half-assed. I don't know, but I don't understand the hate. But I just can't be asked to go online and look up all of the comic book lines for Spider-Man and then watch or read all of them, buy them and read all of them. That's just way too much work for me. So Alex's video is a lot better.
From a young, inexperienced Spider-Man to a battle-hardened superhero veteran, capable of leading the Avengers into battle. If I forget anything, if I leave...
Spider-Man led the Avengers? I always thought it was Captain America. I never thought Spider-Man did at one point. That's cool.
About your favorite story of Spider-Kid from the 80s or something, feel free to tell...
Yo, look at his design here with the glasses. He's such a dork here, dude. He looks like he came out of grandma's basement for real.
Tell me in the comments. First off, no one likes their time being wasted. I could stretch this out and get like $1 billion in ad revenue, but we all know Spider-Man's origin story. There's no point going over it in tremendous detail. Peter Parker gets bit by a spider, his uncle gets bit by a bullet. With great power comes great responsibility. We've seen it a million times.
Uncle Ben.
However, a lot of people think that it was Uncle Ben who said that famous line. Whereas in the original comic, Uncle Ben shows up for like 2 panels, dies off screen, and Peter learns his lesson from a text box.
What? No way. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm one of those people because I loved the Spider-Man 1 movie and Uncle Ben said that and it's always stuck with me. But it wasn't Uncle Ben originally. Jesus. And I love how these panels are drawn. Like the art style is just so unique, man. It's so charming. I love it. Especially like how they don't really draw backgrounds sometimes. They just have like a yellow or, you know, some other color. I like it.
Up for like 2 panels, dies off screen, and Peter learns his lesson from a text box. Little does Peter know, he is seen crawling out his window by the girl next door, Mary Jane Watson, making her the first ever person to discover Spider-Man's identity. This origin story was meant to be a one-off deal, but due to the popularity of the character, he was soon given his own main series. The Amazing Spider-Man followed the daily double life of Peter Parker as he balanced his high school studies with his secret alter ego. He would be constantly picked on by the people at school, especially by Flash Thompson, who, despite being a relentless bully, would become Spider-Man's #1 fan. He would defend his hero no matter what anyone said about him, even making his own Spider-Man fan club. Completely oblivious that the person he's...
That's so ironic. Oh my goodness. Dude, they should touch on this more. I kind of like this guy. I like this Flash Thompson guy. He actually doesn't like Peter, but he does like Peter because, you know, he likes Spider-Man.
Worshipping is the same one he tries to beat up every day. After a long day of fighting hardened criminals, Peter would come home to Aunt May, who thought he was just this poor little delicate boy who wouldn't harm a fly. And while Aunt May was just this frail old lady who could be taken out by a paper airplane, underneath she was a very strong-spirited fighter who had a lot of wisdom for her nephew. Peter's heroics as Spider-Man would be publicly shamed by J. Jonah Jameson, whose blind hatred for Spider-Man was really just a cover-up for his own self-doubt. As head of the Spider-Man fan club, Flash would speak out against Jameson's biased reporting and even tries to fight him one time. Peter would take pictures of himself as Spider-Man and sell them to Jameson, thus allowing Peter to...
I love this storyline. Like, this is something that just I grew up with, man. I remember playing the Marvel fighting game a long time ago. Not Marvel versus Capcom. I know you guys are thinking that game. No, there was a Marvel fighting game, and it was like a really small roster of characters, and Spider-Man was in it. And I remember every time he would win a fight, he would hang his camera up and jump into a thumbs up pose, and he would say, "This one's for JJ." And I just remember that sticking with me so much. Like, the Daily Bugle is my childhood, man. Just knowing that Spider-Man would take pictures of himself for his boss for money. It's lovely.
Pay for Aunt May's rent. It's also depressing as hell seeing how a single paycheck is enough for him to pay an entire year's worth of rent.
No way!
While at Jameson's
Imagine.
office, Peter meets his secretary, Betty Brandt. The two are very fond of each other and eventually start dating. However, a spanner is thrown into the works when her brother is brutally murdered and she blames Spider-Man for his death. Therefore, Peter can never reveal his identity out of fear that she'll despise him. To make things even worse, Liz Allen, who was previously one of the people who bullied Peter, does a complete 180 and now will stop at nothing until he's wrapped around her finger. Peter doesn't really give a shit, but Betty gets super jealous and their relationship soon falls apart. After they break up, Aunt May's like, "Oh,
so Peter was in a love triangle at one point? Oh no. And it wasn't Mary Jane that was in that love triangle? What?
Don't worry, Peter. I know a beautiful girl. Her name is Mary Jane Watson." But Peter's too busy with Spider-Man stuff, and so he declines the offer. There's something very charming about Peter's early career as Spider-Man. It's light, it's fun, and very nostalgic reading it back now. Seeing this young boy meet all of these iconic characters for the first time. These people who will go on to impact his life in so many ways, and he has no idea of it yet. He's dreaming of being a scientist, not knowing that one day that will come true. We get to see Peter make new friends, fall in love for the first time, and watch as he messes it all up. We see the first...
And that's the beauty of it. He messes it all up. That's where he's relatable. He's one of those heroes that loses. He loses, just like we do. As humans, we lose. And we win too, you know?
Appearances of all his classic villains, such as Dr. Octopus, Sandman, Electro, and Kraven the Hunter. Such tragic characters as Dr. Kirk Connors, who accidentally turns himself into a lizard and
one of my
tries to
favorites,
Spider-Man, only to be cured and return to his loving family. Or the Scorpion, who Jameson helped create to try and capture Spider-Man.
I forgot all about that. Now, I played Spider-Man 2000 on the PS1, and I remember in that they touched on the storyline like a little bit, and I remember Scorpion being in the Daily Bugle and he wanted to fight JJ, and you had to protect JJ like in a fight, and you had to beat up Scorpion. It was really cool.
Only to be driven insane and turn to a life of crime. There's also the mysterious Green Goblin, who's...
What is this panel? Alex, what did you do? He's trying to get some spider cheeks.
His main goal is just to fuck with Spider-Man.
Literally!
Every time Spider-Man would defeat him, he'd go back to his secret lair and it'd be like, "Oh, who is he? Guess who it's gonna be?" And then they just don't tell you. It's also interesting.
Oh, he was a mystery at one point? Oh, I didn't know Green Goblin was like this super mystery.
Interesting to see how little a role Uncle Ben plays in these early issues. His death serves more of an inconvenience to Peter than anything, and after being briefly mentioned in issue 1, he's not even brought up again for the next 30-odd issues. Peter instead looks up to his fellow heroes, such as the Avengers or the Fantastic Four. Sure, he might insult them and get into the odd fight now and again, but deep down he desperately wants to have their confidence, their respect. In his first fight with Dr. Octopus, Peter gets completely annihilated and feels really ashamed about his defeat. He's ready to just give everything up until the Human Torch delivers a powerful speech about resilience and beating the odds no matter what.
The Human Torch is a real one.
Confront Dr. Octopus again and emerges triumphant. Peter's heroic actions come from him.
That's what I love about him. He loses, he cries about it, he hears somebody say something inspiring to him, and then he goes out and he wins.
Just wanting to be better rather than from a burden of guilt. These big superhero teams represent where he's trying to get to, both as a hero and as a person. A bunch
lovely.
of Peter's villains come together to form the Sinister Six, but they're so far up their own asses that they fight him one-on-one instead of as a team, and he wipes the floor with them. Determined to get rid of Spider-Man for good, Jameson commissions a killer robot to hunt him down and capture him. He enlists the roboticist Spencer Smythe to build it, calling it the Spider Slayer. Peter ultimately outsmarts them by making a puppet of himself and tricking them into capturing the puppet. Eventually, Peter graduates from high school, getting a science scholarship at Empire State University. Unfortunately for Peter, Flash is getting a sports scholarship to the same place, so he'll not be getting rid of him anytime soon. At university, Peter meets some new faces, such as his new classmates, Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy. Just as Peter's getting used to this new stage in his life, Aunt May falls hideously ill and is rushed to the hospital. This completely throws Peter off, and he's so busy focusing on Aunt May's health that all his new classmates think he's some sort of massive antisocial prick. It doesn't help that Flash Thompson is there to talk shit about him, reaffirming everything that Harry and Gwen already think of him.
That's
the doctors
terrible.
Are like, listen mate, your aunt's probably fucking dead. So Peter seeks help from Dr. Curtis Connors, aka the Lizard, who tells him of this
It's kind of interesting to see that Harry's not his friend here.
Special serum that can save Aunt May, and it's so unbelievably rare that there's like one in existence. Peter pawns off all his valuables to pay for it. However, Dr. Octopus conveniently needs the same serum for his own research, and hijacks the shipment before it arrives. Peter tracks down Doc Ock to his underwater base, and manages to steal back the serum that Aunt May needs, but it doesn't matter. Because during their fight, the base's structure is so significantly damaged that it collapses on top of them. It's here that we get one of the most iconic Spider-Man moments of all time, where Peter is trapped under the machinery, exhausted and alone, moments away from drowning. Knowing that Aunt May will die if she doesn't get the serum, and fueled by the memory of Uncle Ben, Peter defies all odds through sheer willpower alone, finding the strength to lift an impossible weight and free him from the base's ruins. It's a moment that fully embodies one of Spider-Man's most powerful abilities. His will to always get back up.
I love that.
Peter rushes back to the hospital with the serum and saves.
That's why I think he's most relatable to me, because no matter how many times I've fallen, and I've fallen a lot, man, I've always gotten back up. And I think as a kid, I always looked up to that, you know?
Aunt May's life. He's of course relieved, but now has to go back to his university where everyone hates him. Everyone, that is, except Gwen Stacy, who's determined that Peter isn't all bad and maybe just misunderstood. At this moment in time, Peter is not interested in Gwen because he's still hung up over Betty, who's now dating a guy called Ned. Yes, that Ned.
Oh, that one!
Him. Oh, but Peter, don't you want to meet Mary Jane Watson? She's a beautiful young lass.
Listen to your aunt.
I'm going through my edgy, all women are the same phase. At the same time, we get the first appearance of Norman Osborn, who, at this point, everyone knows he's the Green Goblin. Norman hatches a plan to find out Spider-Man's identity, and so he just follows him home and attacks him out in the open for everyone to see. With the element of surprise, he's able to defeat Peter and take him back to his evil lair. After a villainous speech about how he's going to put Peter in a cheese grater and make his life misery, Peter manages to get free and the two battle it out. If the Goblin escapes, he could go for Aunt May, he could go for Betty. Everything is at risk. And so Peter doesn't hold back. He beats him to near death, covers him in a bunch of deadly chemicals, and accidentally sets him on fire. Still overpowered by doing the right thing, Peter gets Norman to safety. He discovers that the chemicals have messed with Norman's mind, and that he doesn't remember who Peter is, or that he's the Green Goblin. Very convenient, but Peter hands him over to the authorities, saying that Norman is innocent, and actually helped him take down the Green Goblin. Norman is admitted to hospital, and Peter comforts Harry over what happened to his father, an act that brings them closer together and sets them down a path of friendship. Peter begins to heal his reputation at university and finds himself attracted to Gwen. He's about to make a move when, Peter, Mary Jane is here! And in another iconic Spider-Man moment, Peter meets Mary Jane for the first time. He's instantly
okay, let's keep it real. Mary Jane is a baddie here. She is an absolute baddie. Oh my God, what is happening? I don't blame Peter. Like, hey, Peter was like, maybe I should have listened to my aunt like a long time ago. Like, she was definitely right on that.
Taken aback. Her beauty, her charm, her carefree attitude. Peter's like, alright Gwen, respectfully, you can fuck off. And instantly starts dating Mary Jane.
I don't blame him, bro. The redheads
thing. So Peter is still going for Gwen. The college era of Spider-Man is one of my favorites and is equally as nostalgic as his high school days. It took
I mean, what's crazy about that though, my man was winning. Like, that's the best love triangle you could ever be in.
What worked from the previous era and developed it further, resulting in some of the most iconic characters that we all know today. And while old villains were expanded upon, we were introduced to some new ones, such as the Rhino, the Shocker, and the Kingpin. Also, Jameson commissioned Spencer Smythe to create yet another Spider Slayer, which works out just as well as the last one. As time went on, Peter's friend group solidified a bit more, with Mary Jane joining the group, and Flash slowly losing the bully persona. Peter finally moved out of Aunt May's house, and started sharing a fancy new apartment with Harry. Peter also grew closer with Gwen, and the two became more romantically involved. But once again, Spider-Man got in the way when, during a fight with Dr. Octopus, Peter suffers complete amnesia and takes days to regain his memory. During this time, he doesn't know his real name or where he lives, and so his absence severely worries his friends and family. What? Peter goes to the police department for help, where he meets Gwen's dad, Captain George Stacy. You see, Captain Stacy has been studying Spider-Man during his retirement, and has come to the conclusion that he's an all-round pretty good guy. So when the other officers have doubts about Spider-Man, Captain Stacy comes to his defense and convinces the others to help him. Meanwhile,
that's what he
Harry's
needs.
looking through Peter's room to find clues of his whereabouts, and discovers some of his Spider-Man equipment.
Oh no!
This leads Harry to put two and two together and come to the realization that Spider-Man kidnapped Peter Parker! Not exactly Sherlock Holmes, are you, mate?
Wait!
Instantly, word breaks out that Spider-Man has in fact...
That's not where I thought that was going. I thought he was going to be like, oh no, my friend's Spider-Man. But no, instead he's like, my friend got kidnapped by Spider-Man. Oh, this is terrible.
Kidnapped Peter Parker while he's in the police department. And they're like, Did you kidnap Peter Parker? No. Just then, Gwen rushes in and demands to know where Peter is. Spider-Man's still suffering from amnesia, so he's like, I don't know what the fuck he's talking about, and escapes before things can escalate. Eventually, Peter gets his memory back through water or something, and returns home to his friends and family. Of course, he needs to think of an excuse, and so the best he can come up with is that Spider-Man kidnapped me, but, he's actually a pretty good guy. Well, that checks out. Captain Stacy takes Peter to see Gwen, who's over the moon to see him. However, while she's helplessly in love with Peter, she now absolutely detests Spider-Man. Captain Stacy became a recurring character.
That's not good.
He was very supportive of his daughter's relationship and was someone that Peter could confide in. This all changed during yet again another battle with Dr. Octopus. During their fight on top of a building, a crowd builds up on the ground below. Captain Stacy arrives at the scene, urging the civilians to get to safety, but it's no use. Things take a turn for the worse when Doc Ock knocks into an abnormally large chimney, sending a mountain of debris hurtling towards a small child. While everyone else runs away, Captain Stacy lunges towards the boy, sacrificing himself to save him. In his last moments, Stacy reveals that he had figured out Peter's identity and tells him to be there for Gwen when he's gone. Spider-Man is blamed for Captain Stacy's death, because of course he is, with Jameson using it as an opportunity to sway the public against him.
Like he always does.
Gwen hated Spider-Man before. Now it's like, on sight. If there was ever any hope of Peter telling her the truth, it's gone. Further drive...
God, so this is what happens between him and Gwen Stacy? This is terrible, man. I don't like this. This is really sad.
A massive rift between them. And so begins a series of extremely depressing issues where Gwen moves to England and Peter thinks he's lost her forever. Harry finds himself caught up in a drug ring and overdoses a bunch of times.
What?
The entire city is now strongly against Spider-Man, abusing him at every chance they get, and every issue ends up with Peter crying. But among the darkness, there is lightness. During her time in England, Gwen has time to reflect on her father's death, realizing that her hatred of Spider-Man got in the way of her relationship with Peter, and that she does truly love him. She comes home to New York, and the two of them are now happier than ever. They go on a romantic vacation to the Savage Land, which goes as well as it sounds. Jameson creates another Spider Slayer. Peter even tries to remove his powers to spend more time with Gwen, but in doing so accidentally grows an extra 4 arms. Once again...
What? Wait a second. This man was getting closer to being an actual spider.
He goes to Kurt Connors for help. Morbius gets in the way, fucks the whole thing up, and the lizard goes out of control. But in the end, they're able to use Morbius's blood to control the lizard and get rid of Peter's extra arms. It's here that Gwen is at her most supportive of Peter. They're both deeply in love, the gang's all together, everything's going perfectly. Until she fucking dies. It's no spoiler that the Green Goblin kills Gwen Stacy. I'd say that the knowledge of her death makes this story all the more impactful. Just knowing that she's doomed no matter what, and there's nothing you can do about it.
That
Norman
sucks.
Osborn suffers a mental breakdown brought on by his son's troubles with addiction. Suddenly, all of his memories start flooding back, and he instantly resumes his mission to make Peter's life hell. His first stop is at Peter's apartment, where he finds an unsuspecting Gwen Stacy. Peter confronts the Goblin on the Brooklyn Bridge, where he throws Gwen to her death. Now, it's meant to be ambiguous whether or not it was the fall or Peter's webbing that killed her, but Roy Thomas, editor of Marvel Comics at the time, basically came out and said, it was the webbing, shut up. Gwen's death really captures what death is for a lot of people. It's sudden, it's unfair. The actual event is over quickly, but its effects, the consequences it has on the people around it, stay around for years. The Green Goblin is impaled by his own glider, and Peter is left with no one to blame but himself. Oh, so that does happen. In the wake of her friend's death, Mary Jane unravels her mischievous, carefree persona, becoming far more serious and emotionally transparent. She and Peter support each other through this time, and ultimately grow closer to one another. Meanwhile, Harry's figuring out that, maybe, Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Harry discovers his father's evil lair and tries to avenge him as the new Green Goblin, blowing up their apartment to try and kill Peter. Peter responds by punching him in the face and leaving him for the authorities. Harry is diagnosed as a complete lunatic and is sent to an asylum. That's now, months after Gwen's death, Peter and MJ enter the dating stage and share their first kiss. Finally, something positive in Peter's life, with him and MJ's relationship pulling him out of his depression. He can't stop thinking of her, and this is exactly what he needs to... Gwen is back. After Peter convinces himself that he's not gone insane, he's now got to deal with the fact that his dead girlfriend is back, and has no idea about his new...
What in the world happened here? How did she... What... Huh?
Very much alive girlfriend, which is just as awkward as it is heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is very awkward.
After some quick investigating, they find that Gwen's body is still in her grave. What? So this new Gwen, while being genetically identical, is something else entirely. This storyline marks a beginning of a certain trend in Spider-Man comics, starting the series down a path that would result in a very confusing, controversial mess. Clones. Right. You see, this new Gwen Stacy is actually a genetic experiment created by one of Spider-Man's most infamous enemies, the Jackal. Spider-Man's villains have always had these tragic backstories. Dr. Octopus was a scientist whose experiment messed with his head. The Lizard was just a family man trying to grow his arm back. And the Jackal is a nonce. A professor at Empire State University, the Jackal fell in love with one of his students and became very jealous of her boyfriend at the time. After her death, he was so heartbroken and used his scientific skills to clone her back from the dead. He then dressed up in a Grinch costume and psychologically tortured Spider-Man with the clone of his dead girlfriend. And if that wasn't enough, and this next bit's actually a pretty genius plan, he creates a clone of Spider-Man with all of his memories and personality so that, from the clone's perspective, he is Spider-Man. He then kidnaps the real Spider-Man and switches them about so they have no idea who the clone is. Jackal blows himself up. He's a bitch, who cares? But what matters is that one of the Spider-Men dies with him. So while it's back to normal...
Bro, this is some nasty work. This is some absolutely nasty work. Like, we went from things like getting back to normal, as in it was going into like a upward climb. I was like, oh, okay, MJ and him. Oh, nice. And then next thing you know, they're like, clones. Gwen Stacy's a clone, and guess what? Peter's gonna get kidnapped by a clone, and there's this weird teacher that liked Gwen Stacy at one time, and that's why there's a clone, and then he dresses up as a Grinch and stuff like that. Like, what is this? This is out of left field, man. Nasty work.
There's only one Peter Parker. He's not actually sure if he's the real Peter, which sends him into an existential crisis.
This is
realizing
crazy.
That she's not actually Gwen Stacy. The clone of Gwen leaves New York to become her own person. I'm sure these clones will never be a problem in the future. Meanwhile, Jameson goes to create yet another Spider Slayer. However, this time, Spencer Smythe is like, fuck your Spider Slayers, and tries to kill Jameson, only to end up dying himself. Aunt May almost marries Dr. Octopus. I can't remember why, and I don't care. Also, Kurt Connors...
Hey, let's be honest. Doc Ock is the best villain of all time, man. There is nothing that could cause more despair than your own villain marrying your aunt, someone who's your mother, bro. That is nasty work.
Has beef with this guy called Stegron, who's basically the lizard that he turned himself into a dinosaur. Kurt's son Billy is kidnapped, and the lizard goes toe-to-toe with Stegron, who's now got an army of dinosaurs, and Spider-Man's caught in the middle of it. Stegron falls into a river and dies, and Kurt is reunited with his family. From this point on, Kurt became Spider-Man's solution to everything. Hey, someone put a bomb on us. Help. The Moonstones. Something to do with the moon? While the whole clone situation puts some strain on Peter and MJ's relationship, they eventually heal things and Peter ends up proposing to her, to which she says no. She friend-zones him and moves to Florida. This just so happens to take place in the same issue as the Big Wheel. Sure, the majority of Peter's college friends are either dead, clinically insane, or in a different state, but at least it's time for him to graduate. Except he's actually denied graduation because he missed one gym class by accident. Peter starts dating the Black Cat, which is great because now he doesn't have to hide his identity or worry about her getting hurt.
Hey, Black Cat is a baddie.
And is cured of his insanity, so it's like the whole thing never happened. Spider-Man's sent to fucking space and fights one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse. Bit of a step up, but during his cosmic adventure, he gains a cool new black costume, which can transform into whatever he wants with a single thought, making outfit changes so much easier.
What is that?
Realizing that Black Cat only cares about the spider and not the man, their relationship falls through, just in time for Mary Jane returning home from Florida. There was probably another Spider Slayer in there, built by Smythe's son.
Girl, heck no. You friend zoned me, and now you're gonna come running back home and expect me to just be no. You think I'm just gonna welcome you with open arms like that? Ain't no way. MJ, you can go back to Florida.
Once you read like 800 issues in a week, they all start to blend together. It's here
we reach a
crucial point in Peter and MJ's relationship, in which MJ has had enough of hiding the truth and reveals that she's known Peter's secret all along.
Yeah, she's known.
The constant knowledge of Peter risking his life has gotten too much for her, which is why she turned Peter down and left New York.
Oh, I forgot about that a little bit.
If they're honest with each other, the two promise to be there for each other and figure out how their relationship is going to work. Peter gets a little bit freaked out when his new costume starts swinging him around New York while he's asleep, and so he goes to the Fantastic Four to get it checked out. Upon learning that it's actually alive, Peter has them remove it and put it in a tube. It's not that easy though, as the suit soon escapes and forces itself back onto Peter.
Onto him?
Struggling to get it off, Peter discovers its main weakness, as the sound of a church bell traumatizes the symbiote, seemingly killing it for good.
If you guys have played the latest Marvel Spider-Man 2 on PS5, this is very familiar, isn't it?
Despite this, Peter would still wear a cloth version of the black suit, because Black Cat thought it was hot. Did someone say Spider Slayer? With Smythe dead, Jameson hires Dr. Marla Madison to build another one, but the two actually fall in love and eventually get married. As a wedding gift, Spider-Man makes out with him. What the fuck, Spider-Man? Blaming Jameson for what happened to him, the Scorpion kidnaps Marla in an attempt at revenge, but his plan is short-lived and he's stopped by Spider-Man. Spider-Man also fights alongside the mercenary Silver Sable, taking down such evil villains as the Black Fox, the Jack-O-Lantern, and the US government. As Peter and MJ grow closer and closer, Peter realizes that this is the person who he wants to spend the rest of his life with. And after a massive kick in the balls of a cliffhanger, we get to the next issue, where MJ says, yes! Okay, she initially turns him down, yet again, but we soon learn that she's just afraid of marriage because of how her parents turned out. Everyone in her family ran out on her and tried to escape their responsibilities, so it's almost in her nature to run away from big decisions like this.
That's very valid. But after
learning that it's not a bad thing to commit to someone you love, MJ accepts Peter's proposal. And so it's time for Spider-Man to get married. Wedding guests include Aunt May, Flash, Harry, Jameson, Marla, Robbie Robertson of the Daily Bugle, MJ's Aunt Anna, and Betty. No, Ned. Ned died. Peter and MJ move into an apartment together as newlywed husband and wife. This is something I love about the Spider-Man comics from, before. Can
we talk about how Peter is a Chad in the comics? Like, look at him, man. And they were hating on Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield is a really good-looking person, right? And from going from like Tobey Maguire to him, it's kind of like, it kind of makes sense. Like, I know everybody hated him. They were like, oh, this is a hot, like, Peter Parker. It just doesn't make any sense. He's supposed to be a nerd and a loser and stuff like that. But I mean, like, look at the comics. I mean, he's kind of a Chad, man. Look at him. What are you talking about?
For the most part, they let Peter grow, not just physically from a teenager to an adult, but as a person as well. Sure, he still has his flaws, as any character should, but you can see him become more mature. You can see how he's learned and improved from his years of being a superhero. Spider-Man's always been about relatability, and sure, him having his life out of order or being really unlucky is part of it, but it's his growth that's the most relatable aspect for me. Like all of us, Peter gets anxious and uncertain about each new chapter of his life, but he still accepts the change and embraces it. Whether it's going to college, having to find a whole new group of friends, graduation, choosing the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with, married life, parenthood, accepting and moving on from the death of a loved one. If there's one thing I hope this video illustrates, it's that change is key to Spider-Man. Shortly after their honeymoon,
life in
Peter
general.
and MJ are tormented by Kraven the Hunter, who, after a lifetime of being defeated and humiliated by Spider-Man, hatches a plan to kill him and redeem his honour as a hunter. In the past, Kraven would use spears, darts, all sorts of traditional hunting equipment. But what have they done for him lately? So Kraven abandons his usual set of tools in favour of a gun, which he uses to just straight up fucking murder Spider-Man.
Oh my god.
Kraven buries Spider-Man's body himself, puts on a Spider-Man costume, and stands over his grave in what is possibly one of the most coldest villain moments of all time. But he doesn't just stop
This is nasty work also. Wow.
there. He then goes around doing Spider-Man's job for him, going so far as to kill people, thus ruining Spider-Man's reputation.
Wow.
The only person he doesn't fool is Mary Jane, who instantly sees through Kraven's disguise. After a series of visual metaphors which definitely scarred any kids reading it at the time, Peter uses his indomitable will and love for MJ to dig the way out of his own grave. He goes to confront Kraven, but Kraven refuses to fight back. Sure, Spider-Man may still be alive, but it doesn't matter. He proved himself superior and made his point, that he was worthy of the title Kraven the Hunter, and his honour was restored. He leaves a confession for the police, clearing Spider-Man's name, and with that, Kraven shoots himself in the head.
Whoa!
Both this story and the Death of Jean DeWolf arc marked a darker time for Spider-Man. With brutal deaths and disturbing imagery, Spider-Man comics were at their most mature, but they weren't just dark and edgy for the sake of it. They were grounded in character and the themes of morality, revenge, flaws in the system, all of which produced some of the most memorable Spider-Man stories to date.
That's what makes them great.
We reach Amazing Spider-Man issue 300, featuring the first appearance of Venom. Already traumatized by her run-in with Kraven, MJ comes home.
I'm a big fan of just giving it to us, you know what I mean? Just no censorship. You know, life isn't censored. Why should these be? You know, so just give it to us. If it's dark, man. If it's realistic, it's realistic. I want it. That's the point of these comics.
To find this. No matter the amount of life-threatening situations she's been in, MJ has always remained strong in the face of danger, so Peter is determined to find out what could have possibly made her feel so helpless. Upon confronting this strange new creature, we get a look at his tragic backstory. Eddie Brock was just a simple reporter.
This is where Eddie Brock comes in.
One of the Daily Bugle's competitors. After Spider-Man exposed his fraudulent journalism, Eddie's career was made into a laughingstock, and with his life completely ruined, he had no other option but just to off himself. Raised as a Catholic, however, Eddie believed suicide to be a mortal sin, and so before he took his own life, he went to a church to pray for forgiveness, the same church in which Spider-Man was fighting the symbiote. It latched onto Eddie, feeding off his humiliation and desire for revenge, transforming him into Venom. And in another contender for the coldest villain moments of all time, Venom webs Spider-Man to that same church bell, so that when midnight strikes and the bell starts to ring, Spider-Man will be squished into tiny pieces, thus exorcising him. Spider-Man breaks free through the power of bullshit, and defeats Venom by throwing him into the ground. He takes Eddie to the Fantastic Four, who put him in a tube and ship him off to some gulag. With MJ still traumatized by Venom, Peter ditches his black costume in favour of his classic red and blue. Meanwhile, Aunt May worries that she's been getting in the way of her nephew's marriage and distances herself from everyone. MJ reassures
Oh my goodness. MJ, what is all that you hiding back there?
That she's been getting in the way of her nephew's marriage and distances herself from everyone. MJ reassures her that they do still need her and still want her as part of their lives, bringing them closer than ever. May also finds a new partner by the name of Nathan. He's a bit of a knob, but the two have some decent chemistry and he's vital for May to move on from her dead husband, and he's dead. Also, Black Cat finds out that Peter's now married to MJ and starts dating Flash just a
Bro, I love the Betty Boop crop top she's got there. That is fire. That is actually fire. Yo, she was killing it with that fit.
Mess with him. Alright, it's the fucking 90s. A lot of people really don't like this era because of all the clones and, Marvel and DC were just trying to outdo each other in terms of who could make the most weirdest, most edgiest shit imaginable. Like Kane, a rejected clone of Spider-Man who uses his spider powers to stick his hand to people's faces and rip them off.
Okay, that's weird.
Cletus Cassidy, a serial killer who shares a cell with Eddie Brock. When the Venom symbiote has a baby, it latches onto Cletus and he becomes the superpowered mass murderer known as Carnage. After Harry had got his amnesia, things were working out for him. He married Liz from Peter's high school. The two had a son called Normie. He's having a gay old time. That is until the X-Men do some bullshit that messes with everyone's heads, and now all of Harry's Goblin memories are restored. And of course you'd expect him to go Goblin mode on everyone and Spider-Man would have to stop him. But no. It's actually a pleasant surprise when Harry doesn't instantly turn evil and instead goes round trying to be a superhero. Unfortunately, it doesn't last long, as Harry is repeatedly haunted by visions of his dead father, and eventually the Green Goblin persona takes over. Once again determined to avenge his father, the Goblin confronts Peter and tries to blow him up. During the fights, Harry's real personality starts to fight the Goblin, and he keeps switching between the two personas. Peter tries to get Harry to fight it, but it's no use. After a fierce battle, Peter surrenders himself to the Goblin, saying that the only way this ends is if one of them dies. Even though he has every advantage, the Goblin can't bring himself to kill Peter, proving that Harry's still in there and still fighting to do the right thing. The Goblin flees the scene and spends the next 12 issues swimming in Goblin juice, making himself stronger, crazier, and diluting what's left of Harry's personality. But while this special juice does enhance him, it's also killing him from the inside. He then starts stalking Peter, following him in the street or at the Daily Bugle, threatening to give up his identity. He even goes so far as to bring Mary Jane to the same place that Gwen died, just as another way of fucking with him. Peter takes the bait and confronts him, still hopeful that his old friend can be redeemed. The Goblin lures Peter to a building rigged with explosives, and drugs Peter so that he can barely move. It's clear to him that their rivalry will go on forever, so the Goblin plans for both of them to die in the explosion. That way he'll have avenged his father's death, while also ending his own mental suffering. Peter is fucked, and can do nothing but lie there and wait to be blown up. However, the day is saved by MJ, who has brought Harry's son with her in an attempt to break through to him. Upon realizing that his son is about to be turned to ash, Harry's personality snaps back. He instantly gets MJ and Normie to safety, realizes he forgot about Peter, and saves him as well. But the Goblin formula has taken too much of a toll on his body, and Harry...
I love that MJ saved Peter here, and it reminds me of how strong she was in the new video game. And just how they portray her in that series in general. She's very strong-willed. I love it.
Harry collapses. Harry thanks Peter for believing in him and lets him know that no matter what happened between them, he still considers him his best friend. He holds Peter's hand and smiles before succumbing to his injuries and dying. As Peter grieves his friend's death, the issue ends with a picture of Peter and Harry in their college days. A simpler, happier time before any of this happened.
That's horrible.
Alright, it's time for the Clone Saga. Now this event was stretched over several years and has a fuck ton of characters, so it was a nightmare to navigate. For this video I did want to actually read everything myself, and not just rely on the wiki, but my god, it helped. If the story just took place in one comic and was really, really long, then sure, that's fine. But it took place back and forth between the 4 concurrent Spider-Man series at the time, plus the 30-something other series that the story was planted in between. And you know what? I didn't actually have to read like half of these. Most of them have fuck all to do with the main story, but that's what Wikipedia told me. Maybe the teachers were right about Wikipedia all along. The actual main story is pretty simple if you remove like half the stuff they threw in there. Remember that clone of Spider-Man that the Jackal used to fuck with him? Turns out he didn't die, and has actually been living in secret under the name of Ben Reilly. After doing a fancy DNA test, it's revealed that our Peter, the one we've been following for the past 30 years, is in fact the clone.
Oh my god.
Is actually the original Peter Parker from those very first issues. Oh my god,
this is
also,
terrible.
MJ is pregnant. Another existential crisis ensues, but you know what? This is actually kind of good news. Now that there's another Spider-Man, Peter can now focus more on his family and dedicate most of his time to be a dad. And so Peter retires from being a superhero and lets Ben take his place as the new Spider-Man. Some stuff happens. Venom, clonage, maximum clonage. Oh shit. They got Speedball in this? And then at the end, it's revealed that Norman Osborn is alive, and he's been pulling the strings this whole time. Turns out Norman faked the DNA test, because why not? Fuck you. And Peter is actually the original. This is proven when, during a final confrontation...
This is where it gets really convoluted, huh? Oh man, I'm getting a headache.
With Osborn, Ben sacrifices himself to save Peter and his body turns to ash. The Clone Saga then ends on a very tragic note. Peter and MJ's child is stillborn, which is probably one of the most traumatic experiences any couple can have. Why add this to the list of tragedies they've faced?
Sorry.
Well, the story is that Marvel thought that Peter having a child would age him up too much, and the change would be too much for the readers without realizing that's the whole fucking point.
That's
and
the
comes
point!
Right after Aunt May gives them a speech about how much of a responsibility it is to raise a child.
Right.
Responsibility? Spider-Man? The Clone Saga may have been a controversial, convoluted mess, but in the midst of all the chaos, we got Amazing Spider-Man 400, which is just an absolutely beautiful issue and marked one of the biggest changes in Peter Parker's life.
Okay, I'm ready.
Aunt May's been on the cusp of death for the past 30 years, and having got another illness, it's clear she's not going to last much longer. She's advised to stay in bed and rest, but May wants to make the most of the time she has left with Peter, and they visit the top of the Empire State Building. Much to Peter's surprise, May reveals that she's known he was Spider-Man for a very long time, and says that Uncle Ben would have been proud of him. Now weaker than ever, Peter takes May home to rest. When Peter tries to call the doctor, May refuses. She knows that she's way past her time, but she just held on that little bit longer so she could say her goodbye to Peter. While she knows he won't take it well, she reassures him that she's had a good, long life, and that she couldn't be prouder of the kind, decent soul that Peter has always been. MJ and Aunt Anna arrive to find a devastated Peter grieving over May's body, and they break down into tears together.
Just
Aunt
like
May
me
is
right
buried
now.
next to Uncle Ben, and Peter accepts yet another inevitability of life. The 90s marked the last real progression in Peter's stages of life.
Aunt May is so beautiful, man. That moment. Oh, man. It's just so sad to see Peter like that.
He'd gone from an angsty teenager who lived in his Aunt May's house and had no one to confide in, to a mature, married man who'd lost more than he deserved, but had loved ones to support him and be honest with. This was of course ruined by a number of decisions made by Marvel in the dying breath of the 90s. New writers step in. Aunt May is back.
Of course.
Turns out she didn't actually die and blames her death on rap music? The fuck?
What? I'm over here crying. Y'all got me teared up. And then all of a sudden they do this. Oh, I'd be so mad if I was a comic book reader at this time. Like, I would have been breaking down, crying at that comic. Oh my God. And then they come out with the next issue and they're like, oh, well, she was just playing. The rap music really got to her, like it was a little too much. Like, what?
Also, she doesn't know that Peter is Spider-Man because that wasn't her. That was some actress clone thing that the Green Goblin made. MJ goes on a plane and gets blown up, but turns out she actually wasn't on the plane and she got kidnapped. Peter's like, okay, I don't care, and starts kissing this teenager. Okay, I'm doing this run a disservice by explaining it like this, but it more or less cements a trend in Spider-Man comics of 1. Shaking things up for no other reason than just trying to get an increase in sales, which never actually ends up working, and 2. Refusing to let Peter grow, or actively regressing his character in an attempt to make him more relatable. Peter saves MJ from the kidnapper, to which she uncharacteristically says that they need to go on a break, and the two of them separate. Not the brightest of times, but here's when J. Michael Strazinsky comes in. At the start of the 21st century, Strazinsky took over Amazing Spider-Man and was like, alright, time to fix this mess. First things first, get Peter and MJ back together. But don't just have them instantly come back. Make the most of their time apart. Exploring why it is they need each other, and so that when they do reunite, it's satisfying and it's earned.
Oh my God, this guy is a freaking genius. Good job. Somebody that actually knows how to write here is writing.
This is Spider-Man in his absolute prime. Having become a teacher at his old school, Peter is able to express his passion for science while helping the same vulnerable kids that he used to be. His sense of responsibility is in full swing, going out of his way to help impoverished students and making a genuinely positive impact on the neighborhood, not just by punching a villain in the face, but by being compassionate and just putting in the effort. Less
I love
spider,
that.
more man. His years of crime fighting are evident in the way that he tackles problems. He's still got that witty trickster's edge from Stan's original comics. He's still tremendously unlucky and suffers hard times, but there's always that glimmer of hope in there somewhere. Some people don't like what Straczynski did with the spider totem stuff, suggesting that Peter's powers came from a magical spider god. I for one can't get enough of it, but it's important to note that he's more just posing a question rather than giving a concrete explanation. One of the best things that he did was completely revamp the character of Aunt May. In the past, there were signs of her internal strength, which is something issue 400 understood. But a lot of the times it would be forgotten, and she'd be reduced to this weak old lady who would die from shock if she ever found out her nephew's secret. Strazinsky understood that for someone to take in a child that wasn't originally hers, raise him despite all of the other tragedies in her life, watch as the love of her life is gunned down in front of her, watch as her nephew suffers loss after loss, and feel like she can't talk to him about it, try to find comfort in someone new only to have them ripped away from her, to suffer through the loneliness of old age, and even then to still keep going. A life like that would require absolute, unparalleled strength, and something like Peter being Spider-Man wouldn't change that. When May discovers Peter's secret by accident, she's realistically in shock, but after having time to process it, the two sit down and have a lengthy conversation about everything they've been through, all of the years they've lost to a lie, and how Aunt May just thought he was gay the whole time. This is also the first time that the great power, great responsibility line was attributed to Uncle Ben, and was no longer stuck in that little text box. A bunch of cool stuff happens, some not so cool stuff happens, not his fault. Peter fights the Spider Queen, whose kiss gives him all sorts of new powers, such as organic webbing out of his wrist. Peter then dies and comes back to life.
Oh, okay. Let me talk about this. So growing up, when I watched the Tobey Maguire movies for the first time, I remember thinking to myself, oh, that's how his powers work. The webs come out of his wrists. So then when I saw the Andrew Garfield and the Tom Holland movies, I was like scratching my head like, hold on, why does he have web shooters? Like, what the heck are those things? I thought they came naturally like out of his body. That's the whole point of him being Spider-Man, right? Because not only does he have like the, the reflexes and stuff like that and the ability to crawl up walls, but he has the webs because it makes sense, right? But I was wrong. I was like, okay, when I think somebody told me, I don't remember who it was. One of my friends told me that no, like the web shooters is like the original thing or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, so did Sam Raimi just like pull that out of his butt or something? Is that just like, did it come from the comics or did it not? So this right here is telling me that it did come from the comics, and I like that.
Don't worry about it. He also fights a villain called Paste Pot Pete, and upon hearing this ridiculous name, bursts out into so much laughter that he can no longer fight the villain. Things really start to change when, after a villain attacks their homes and leaves Peter, MJ, and Aunt May homeless, they're invited to live with the Avengers. They don't have to worry about money anymore. Peter becomes close to Iron Man and becomes his right-hand man. Aunt May's kind of got a thing going on with Jarvis. And then Speedball, old fucking Speedball, comes along and ruins everything. If you don't know, I'm talking about the massive Civil War event of 2006. It kicks off when a bunch of inexperienced superheroes attempt to stop a team of supervillains, but the whole thing goes sideways and ends up causing a devastating amount of civilian casualties. This leads the government to rethink how they should treat superheroes, and Peter is left with a choice. He can either give up his secret identity to the government and become their little errand boy, or he and his family can be hunted down and put in a hell prison. Iron Man is supportive of the government, and so, being his right-hand man, Peter goes along with him, an act that he would come to regret so very, very much. It's important to note that Peter doesn't just go along with Iron Man because, oh, it's Iron Man. After what happened with Speedball, he genuinely does believe that superheroes need to be trusted, and that this is one step in the right direction. However, out of all the people who are on Iron Man's team, all the heroes who are publicly in support of the government, Peter's the only one with a secret identity. So, to practice what they preach and get the public on their side, they ask Peter to reveal his identity to the world. Ooh. If you think this is stupid, Peter does too. But after being convinced by his loved ones that this is the right thing to do, and that this would demonstrate responsibility for his actions, Peter accepts. And so, in a moment he's been dreading ever since he was a teenager, Spider-Man reveals his identity on live television. Peter's whole life goes to shit. He's abused by the public, his family is hunted down,
was a bad move.
Jameson tries to sue him for like $2 trillion. The only real people who stand up for him are Flash Thompson and Betty, but that's basically it. Still, Peter made a promise, and continues to hunt down those who defy the government, even though it kills him inside. Upon seeing the Hell Prison where they're keeping all of the unregistered superheroes, Peter reaches the final straw and turns against Iron Man. This is quite difficult as they still live in Avengers Tower, so after moving his family to a dodgy motel, Peter joins Captain America to fight for the side of freedom. From the shadows, Kingpin, along with many other of Spider-Man's villains, start a plot to kill Peter and his family. In the wake of the
course they
Civil
do.
War, Captain America is shot dead, and Peter barely makes it out alive. He returns to MJ and Aunt May, only for one of the Kingpin's men to open fire on them. Aunt May is hit instead of Peter, and Peter rushes her to the hospital. While May desperately clings to life, Peter brutally tracks down everyone responsible for the incident,
he's mad.
which leads him right to the Kingpin. Breaking into the prison he's held in, Peter humiliates the Kingpin, using his raw strength and no longer pulling his punches, setting an example of what happens when you come after Spider-Man's family. With Aunt May's condition getting worse and worse, Peter tries to get help from everyone he can think of. He goes to Iron Man, but Iron Man's like, no, die. And so he goes to Doctor Strange, who has literal magic that can raise people from the dead, but he's like, oh, I'm sorry man, I can't help you because... And so with no one else to turn to, Peter thinks, the devil! It's here we get one more day. It's not exactly a groundbreaking opinion to say that this is the worst thing humanity has ever produced in the history of anything ever. A certain someone at Marvel didn't want Peter and MJ to be married, and so this story was created to retcon like 40 years of history and assassinate Peter's character. And even though I despise it with every fibre of my being, and it makes me want to devolve myself into a fish and go live in the sea, it's actually not that bad. Hear me out.
Really?
The actual presentation, how this story is told, is actually alright. And in some places, dare I say, actually kind of beautiful. The devil, aka Mephisto, shows up and gives Peter a deal. He will save Aunt May's life, he will make everyone forget Spider-Man's identity, he'll provide a fresh new start for all of the characters, on the condition that Peter and MJ are no longer married. In what is possibly the worst divorce of all time, Peter and MJ's marriage will be erased from history. They will have no memory that anything has changed, and they will spend the rest of their days apart from one another, living with an unbearable emptiness in their souls which longs for a love they won't even know existed. Instead of accepting what happened to Aunt May, who...
You guys remember when we were watching the Justice League movie, and Barry Allen lost his mom? And then when he lost his mom, he had his girl, Iris, right? But then when he went back in time and got his mom back, he lost his girl. This is so familiar.
As much as I love her character, was way past her expiration date, let's be real. Not to mention that she would definitely be against sacrificing her beloved nephew's happiness. Peter says, okay, sure he's reluctant to do it, but he still does it anyway. And so Peter and MJ have 24 hours left to spend with each other. And this bit's actually kind of beautifully written. It's almost as if Strazinsky is saying, hey, I don't want to do this, but there's nothing I can do. Even MJ's like, what are we doing? This is stupid. If you swap out Mephisto for Marvel editorial, you can really identify with the characters and the situation they're forced into. Having developed these characters over the course of his run, building up a genuinely realistic human relationship between them, Straczynski is able to make their last moments together very touching and impactful. And
I kind of like that, though.
Infuriating big red fuck you reset button is pressed, pretty much erasing decades of character development. That's like half an hour of this video. Gone. Mary Jane is now the ex-girlfriend of Peter Parker for reasons unknown. Aunt May's alive and well, has no idea Peter is Spider-Man. Are you really gonna do this a third time, Marvel? Also, Harry's back. Way to negate that touching moment. But at the end of the day, it's a comic book I didn't like. It happened like 15 odd years ago, and hey, you gotta take the bad with the good. For every Kraven's last hunt, there's a one more day. For every beautifully written character piece, there's a bite in the fucking ass. At least Stan Lee liked it. And so begins a brand new day. An editorial attempt to wipe the slate clean and get Peter back to his roots. You know, he's young, he's cool, he's got his life out of order, he sleeps around, he doesn't have a job, he's back at his Aunt May's house. God, this physically
that's lovely.
hurts. We get new villains such as Mr. Negative, a superpowered
this
crime
is where he
lord
comes
whose
in.
touch can either heal people or corrupt them. There's also Overdrive, Freak, Menace, Paper Doll, Screwball. Barack Obama's in this. Flash has returned from the war in Iraq, having lost both of his legs. Aunt May's now volunteering at a homeless shelter, which is coincidentally run by Mr. Negative in disguise. Also, she's dating J. Jonah Jameson's dad. And speaking of J. Jonah Jameson, he's essentially fired after the Daily Bugle is bought out by another company. And so, leaving his career in journalism behind, he decides to run for mayor. His first course of action upon being elected is to publicly fund a death squad to capture Spider-Man. You could call it a Spider Slayers. And
Oh
these
my
first
God,
few issues
give
suffer
it a
from
rest.
the whiplash of the new status quo. But once it sinks in and you get used to it, there are some pretty good stories. Here's one that's really fucked up. Eddie Brock starts to have doubts about the Venom symbiote, which is bad for the symbiote because it needs a host to survive. And so it plants memories in Eddie's head, convincing him that he has terminal cancer and that Venom is the only thing keeping him alive. This psychological effect then leads to him actually getting cancer, to which the Venom symbiote is like, oh shit, and ditches him, leaving him to die of cancer. The symbiote then goes on to bond with Mac Gargan, aka the Scorpion, creating a all-new powerful Venom. With very little time left to live, Eddie wants to make peace.
I like that design of Venom
and starts
there.
volunteering at the same shelter as Aunt May. During his time there, he comes in contact with Mr. Negative, whose touch completely heals Eddie of his cancer. Eddie is over the moon, just in time for the new Venom to show up and start trashing the place. Upon meeting its old host, the symbiote is like, alright Gargan, see ya, and starts trying to bond with Eddie again. When the Venom symbiote fuses with the special healing cells still left in Eddie's body, a new symbiote is created, transforming Eddie into the new Anti-Venom. With the help of Spider-Man, Anti-Venom takes down Venom and goes off on a mission to save the world or something. It's here we reach Amazing Spider-Man issue 600, which marked a very special occasion, the wedding of Aunt May and J. Jameson Sr. But before Peter can attend, he has to deal with a brand new Dr. Octopus. You see, while Otto has his robot arms, he himself is just a regular guy. And after a lifetime of fighting Spider-Man, each punch to the face has resulted in a series of traumatic brain injuries, leading him to be diagnosed with less than a year to live. And just like Eddie, he doesn't want his legacy to be that of villainy.
That adds up.
He wants
That's
to leave
interesting.
the people of New York with something positive. And so he creates an army of Octobots and spreads them all about the city, psychically connecting them to every appliance, every mode of transport, thus creating a perfect system where everything runs on time without any issues. But because this system is controlled by his subconscious, Otto's hatred for Spider-Man starts to corrupt the city, and all of its appliances start blowing up in an attempt to kill him. Spider-Man tracks Otto to his lair, where he finds him in a disturbing zombified state, his new suit keeping him alive while adding 4 extra tentacles. Spider-Man manages to defeat him by plugging his own brain into the system and overriding Otto's so-called perfect city. Otto escapes by the skin of his teeth, and Peter goes home to prepare for Aunt May's wedding. The ceremony is actually really sweet.
So he's still alive, Doc Ock?
Down the aisle, Mayor Jameson gives a very thoughtful, kind of insulting speech, and the marriage becomes official, making Peter and Jameson technically related. Aunt May throws her bouquet, the tradition being that whoever catches it will be the next to get married, which is then caught by none other than Mary Jane Watson. But this happy, wholesome time doesn't last forever. We get an incredibly sad story about the Rhino, who has abandoned crime completely and has a steady job and loving wife. And it's really sweet hearing him talk about his wife, how he'll do anything for her, making it all the more devastating when his wife is killed right in front of him. The Rhino believes it to be a punishment for thinking he could have a normal life, and turns back to his life of crime. Kurt Connors starts losing his mind and transforms into the Lizard once more, brutally killing a bunch of people in his lab. In order to get rid of Kurt,
that's a cool shot of him there, though. Like that panel.
Kurt's son Billy, and prepares to kill him as well. Spider-Man is too late to rescue him, and while Kurt's consciousness begs the Lizard to stop, he can do nothing but watch as he eats his own son. With this sacrifice, the Lizard sheds into a new form, and Kurt Connors is truly dead. He escapes into the shadows while Spider-Man is left utterly defeated. And because Peter can't catch a break, Kraven the Hunter is brought back from the dead. He's resurrected by his wife and daughter, who stabbed Spider-Man through the heart in a ritualistic sacrifice. But Kraven is like, why the fuck did you bring me back? I was happy with my whole big sacrifice thing, and then you fucking Palpatined me. And to make things worse, they got the wrong Spider-Man. It was actually Kane, Spider-Man's edgy clone from the 90s. This mistake has corrupted the sacrifice and has actually put a curse on Kraven, making him immortal until he's killed by none other than Spider-Man's hand. So we have a man who wants to die, who can only be killed by a man who hates killing. Kraven begs Peter to kill him, but Peter refuses. He tells Kraven to treat his resurrection as a second chance and use it to do some good. And so Kraven does exactly that. He moves to the Savage Land to start a new life, although he's
that's good for him.
His family resurrecting him, and so he kills them. It's around this time that Peter starts dating forensic scientist.
So Peter gives him a second chance and he just goes and kills his family? Dude, no. No. I'm sorry, Peter. You got to go find him and kill him because that's not right.
And friend of Harry Osborn, Carly Cooper. Also, Marla puts in a good word for Peter at the tech company Horizon Labs, and Peter is hired as a member of their think tank. For once in his life, he's making a really good salary, there are no set hours, so him disappearing as Spider-Man won't be a problem, and most importantly, he can once again express his love for science, fulfilling the dreams he had all the way back when he was a teenager. Peter impresses his new boss by essentially just repackaging old Spider-Man inventions into new consumer-friendly devices. Meanwhile, the US government removes the symbiote from Mac Gargan and gives it to their best military veteran, Flash Thompson. Flash becomes Agent Venom, giving him the power to walk again as he performs a series of missions for the US military.
This could go horribly.
Behind the scenes, Dr. Octopus is beginning his final master plan. Now I know what you're thinking. There hasn't been another Spider Slayer in a while. Oh shit,
here we go.
Alistair Smythe, son of Spencer Smythe, has returned, calling himself the Spider Slayer, and is seeking vengeance for his father's death. He does so by trying to kill anyone who Jameson's ever loved or has any connection with whatsoever, which, now that they're family, includes Peter. To help him with this goal, the Spider Slayer develops an army of cyborg minions and recruits Mac Gargan, who shares the desire for revenge against Jameson. Smythe gives him an upgraded version of the Scorpion suit and sends him to keep Spider-Man busy. The cyborg minions are sent after Aunt May, Jay, Marla, the Daily Bugle, all in separate places that Spider-Man couldn't possibly be in at once. And then he remembers, oh wait, I'm part of the Avengers. Why don't I just call them for help?
Avengers,
and
yeah,
so
there you go.
He calls them up, and the person on the other end of the phone is Squirrel Girl, who completely ignores all of his requests, to which Spider-Man is like, well, I'm fucked. Surprisingly, Squirrel Girl pulls through in the end, by passing his message over to the real Avengers, who all race to
Iron
save
Fist was there.
Spider-Man's loved ones. However, they soon discover that Smythe...
I think what I do like about the comics is they don't forget about the Avengers. Like, the Avengers are there, and Spider-Man ends up using them at times when he needs them. They're like a lifeline, right?
Programmed the cyborgs with a form of spider sense. Thus, they're able to detect attacks before they happen and overpower the Avengers. If they want to stand a chance, they got to get rid of that spider sense, and so Spider-Man races back to Horizon Labs to develop some way of disabling it. He manages to whip up a neurowave transmitter bioelectrical magical thing that will cover the whole city. But the most important thing is that Spider-Man has to be away from the device once it activates, or it'll fry his spider sense too. Upon planting the device, he's confronted by the Scorpion, who destroys Spider-Man's controls, meaning he can no longer activate it remotely. And so Peter's like, fuck it, and activates it anyway, severely weakening the Spider Slayer army, but also permanently barbecuing his own spider sense. With his plan ruined and no one to back him up, a desperate Smythe tries to kill Jameson himself. Just as he's about to tear a hole in Jameson's chest, Marla throws herself in front of him, sacrificing herself to save her husband. In her last moments, Marla urges Jameson not to waste any more of his life on hate. As she dies in his arms, Jameson refuses to blame Spider-Man for what happened, and puts full blame on himself. After Marla's funeral, Spider-Man makes a vow that from now on, no one will die under his watch. Meanwhile, Anti-Venom finds out that Martin Lee, the head of the homeless shelter, is in fact Mr. Negative, and so he goes to take him out, only to be interrupted by Spider-Man. Eddie tries to tell Peter that Martin Lee is Mr. Negative, but Peter doesn't believe him. Eddie's like, alright then, webs him to a guy's ass, and goes to confront Mr. Negative himself. When Mr. Negative's true identity is exposed, Peter's like, oh shit. Fair enough. All while Dr. Octopus completes the finishing touches to his final plan, secretly launching a number of satellites into orbit. And as if Peter joining Horizon Labs wasn't enough, he's about to fulfill another dream from those early issues, joining the Fantastic Four. In the past, he may have broken into the back of the building, he joined the Fantastic Four, out of them and was like, give me money, but he was doing it all wrong. Instead, all he had to do was be patient and just wait for the Human Torch to die, and then a spot would open up for him. In all seriousness, Johnny Storm sacrifices himself to save the entire universe. In a series of recordings he made in case of his death, he asks Peter to take his place on the Fantastic Four, to which Peter gladly accepts.
I know nothing about the Fantastic Four. I saw the very first movie that came out like years and years ago. But that's it. I don't know anything comic book wise about the team.
However, it's not the Fantastic Four anymore. They've renamed it to the Future Foundation. Now a member of the Avengers and the Future Foundation, and having a full-time job at Horizon Labs, Peter's got barely any time to spend with his girlfriend Carly. Fortunately, Carly's job as a forensic scientist requires her to be on call 24/7, meaning she conveniently has to leave a lot of the time, allowing Peter to go off and be Spider-Man. And you know what? For the first time since his marriage was torn away from him, Peter's life seems to be on track. To replace his spider sense, he's taking lessons from Shang-Chi, who is teaching him Spider-Fu. He's also expanded his equipment. He's got voice command web shooters, a stealth suit, a bulletproof suit, his Future Foundation suit, and his relationship with Carly is going pretty well. That is, until she gets stuck to the ceiling. Everyone in New York is now mysteriously woken up with spider powers. Just a heads up, this is about to get a little bit complicated. As part of a massive experiment, the Jackal has spent the last couple of months covering the city with his own little spider bedbugs, all of which carrying a spider virus. Also, he's resurrected Kane and turned him into a giant tarantula to serve as his right-hand man.
Yeah, sure.
Also, he's captured Captain America and turned him into another big tarantula to serve as his left-hand man. The city is
spider army,
and all of the bridges are blocked off to prevent this spider virus from spreading to the rest of the world. While the majority of citizens are decent people who only use their powers for good, there is a certain vocal minority who'd rather use them for chaos. And so the Jackal begins the next phase of his plan, to round up all of the gangs in New York, give them Spider-Man costumes, and so when the Avengers show up to try and fight them, they won't be able to recognize the real Spider-Man, and they'll beat him up as well. This guy just exists to fuck with Spider-Man, and it's genius. Peter gets tired of being beaten up by his teammates, and ditches his costume. Pretending to be yet another person who woke up with spider powers, Peter rallies the good citizens of New York to make a stand and fight all of the gang members. It now seems that every person in Peter's life, even Jameson, has spider powers.
I love it.
Except Mary Jane.
What?
And Aunt May, but she's out of town. Carly gets a little suspicious and thinks that Peter is a little too good with his spider powers. The Jackal sends Captain America to break through the blockades and let the virus spread. In response, the government deploys Flash to capture him, and his mission is a success. Flash then uses the Venom symbiote to disguise himself as Captain America's tarantula form and returns back to the Jackal undercover. Everything's going according to plan until suddenly everyone in New York mutates, turning into these massive spiders. It's here we learn that the Jackal isn't actually the mastermind behind this.
How do you fix this?
No, that title belongs to the Spider Queen, who used the Jackal's skills to develop a virus, connect it to the spider totem shit that Strazinsky was on about, in order to create her a massive spider army. However, her plan is interrupted by Anti-Venom, who's going about using his powers to cure the giant spiders. So, the Queen sends Captain America, who is actually just Flash in disguise, to go and kill Anti-Venom. Flash, of course, snakes her, and takes Anti-Venom to Horizon Labs, where they can use Anti-Venom's healing qualities to develop a cure for the spider virus. The Queen's like, shit, that's not good, and sends Kane to sabotage the cure. Spider-Man then tries to protect Anti-Venom, but he's completely overpowered by Kane and laid to waste. Just then, Horizon Labs, along with the Future Foundation, creates a device that returns Spider-Man's spider sense. Spider-Man's now got spider sense and spider-fu, throws Kane into the Anti-Venom juice and turns him back into a human. The Queen finds out what happened, gets really angry, fucking kills the Jackal. He was just sitting there, man. What did he do? And turns into a giant spider monster. Both Flash and a now cured Captain America confront the giant Spider Queen, but it's no use, and she starts causing devastation all across the city, surrounded by her massive army of New York spider people.
Okay, the design for the Spider Queen is phenomenal.
Horizon Labs now has a cure, but they just need a way to distribute it. And so Peter's like, hold up, remember that time when Dr. Octopus connected to everything in the city with his little Octobots? Why don't we just do that, but with the cure? And so Peter connects his brain to Otto's system. The Queen sends her army after him, but they're held back by Mary Jane Watson, whose spider powers were merely delayed due to years of her and Peter doing stuff.
That's
as close as I can describe it without risking monetization. Peter cures...
Hey, all of that spider juice? Like... Yo, she took too much spider juice, bro. It delayed the powers.
New York using the Octobots. MJ says that she loves him, but he doesn't hear her, so fuck you. Kane comes in clutch at the last minute, now dressed in Peter's stealth suit, just fucking launches himself into her mouth, which blows her up into a million pieces and scatters her brains all across the city.
Well, that's
the day is saved,
a way to kill
everyone
someone.
is returned to normal, and Carly breaks up with Peter because she's figured out that he's Spider-Man. But hey, don't worry about it. Spider Island, the
Hey, I would too if I knew that you shot a bunch of spider juice in some other girl. Hey, let's stop.
end. And with
I'm
these
sorry,
final
Carly.
few stories, Peter's journey as Spider-Man is slowly but surely coming to a close. Dr. Octopus activates his final plan, an array of satellites covering the globe which accelerates the effect of global warming. As billions of people burn, Otto turns it off and is like, just kidding, that's what's gonna happen to the Earth if we don't do something about it. And so his final gift to the world is to actually reverse global warming. Maybe just lead with that, but okay. Most world leaders are on board with it,
Sure.
and they agree to help produce the last of Otto's required satellites. It seems like Spider-Man is the only person on Earth who has his doubts, and so he calls the Avengers into action, showing off his all-new Sinister Six-proof armor. He leads the charge against
That
Otto and
armor's
his
hot.
fellow villains, but Otto's been preparing for them, and uses a series of gadgets and gizmos to take them down. His plan goes off without a hitch. I mean, Elektra was shot into space, but apart from that, leaving
Whoa.
Spider-Man and Black Widow as the last remaining Avengers. Okay, so there's no one to help them. All of the other superhero teams are conveniently off-world. Black Widow's kinda useless, no offense. Once again, he's fucked. That is, until they're both rescued at the last minute by Spider-Man's old mercenary pal, Silver Sable. They escape on Sable's invisible jet and start hatching a plan to take down Otto. Otto still needs these last few satellites, so if they can break into those factories and stop production, then he can't complete his plan, right? One such factory is in North Africa, and so they fly the invisible jet there in the hopes of sabotaging it. Unfortunately, they are ambushed by the Sandman, who's now made up of all the sand in the entire Sahara Desert.
Whoa.
With the help of Horizon Labs, Spider-Man and his crew are able to detect Sandman's brain, the one singular sand particle which contains his consciousness, and they manage to take him down. Peter and the crew then continue to sabotage factories all across the globe, running into several members of the Sinister Six. But it's no use, as Otto keeps launching satellites faster than they can shut them down, and now the only way to stop him is to confront him directly. Because Mysterio is a backstabbing bitch, they locate Otto's secret underwater base, with Spider-Man and Sable being sent to break in. Upon learning of this, Otto floods the lower levels of his base. During their break-in, Spider-Man and Sable cross paths with the Rhino, which shouldn't be a problem. There are two of them, one of him, all they gotta do is go around him. But Rhino's like, not so easy, you wall-crawling, web-spinning fuck, and prepares to join the ranks of the coldest Spider-Man villain moments of all time. He grabs Sable with his massive Rhino hand and promises that he will not move. As the water rises and the air leaves his lungs, he will not move. He will only loosen his grip when both he and Sable are dead, and he can finally join his dead wife. And so Peter is given another choice. He can either go and stop Octavius, potentially saving billions of lives, or he can fulfill his vow of letting...
Oh God, is he gonna save her? Oh no.
No one die and save Sable. The answer is kind of obvious, and so Peter reluctantly leaves Sable to drown.
Okay, I was about to say.
In a climactic confrontation with his greatest enemy, Otto admits that the whole environmentalist saving the world spiel was a lie, and that he actually intends to wipe out the human race. Not every single person though. He'll leave just less than 1% of the population alive, so they will preserve his legacy as the greatest supervillain of all time. Unfortunately for Otto, he's stuck in a stalemate. With all of his arms being used to hold Spider-Man, he can't reach the control panel and activate his plan. If he tries to use one of his arms to reach said control panel, Spider-Man will get free and stop him from activating the satellites. And so, in a last-ditch effort to succeed, Otto completely abandons his life support and drags his decaying husk of a body towards the controls. With billions of lives depending on him, Peter once again uses his sheer indomitable will to defy his situation, possessing the impossible strength needed to free himself from Otto's arms. With the controls destroyed and his legacy ruined, Otto accepts his defeat, and if the water doesn't take him out, he'll be dead in a couple minutes anyway. But despite all that Otto has done, despite the fact that Sable's already dead, Peter still clings to his promise of no one dying. Otto is taken to the big supervillain prison known as the Raft, and hooked up to life support, only to be remembered as that one guy who didn't solve climate change. Upon his return, MJ throws Peter a massive party to say thank you for saving the world. Oh, are they gonna get back together? No. Just as Peter is about to take a break, suddenly the grave of Billy Connors is robbed, sparking a rumour that a certain villain is back. Morbius.
Morbius?
Yes, it turns out that Morbius has dug up this child's grave in a supposed attempt to cure the lizard. Morbius and Spider-Man take to the sewers and use the combination of his son's DNA and Morbius's blood to transform him back into Curt Connors. It's an apparent success, and they celebrate Kurt's return, completely oblivious that Kurt's consciousness is still well and truly dead, and only the lizard remains. The lizard then spends the next while pretending to be Kurt, faking grief over the loss of his son. His ultimate goal being to blend in until he can return himself back to his righteous, lizardish form. However, during his time spent with the people of Horizon, he grows attached to being a human and all the joys of life, such as video games and Carly Rae Jepsen. It was 2012.
No way!
Even when he's fully developed the formula to change him back, the lizard hesitates, genuinely considering giving up and living the wonders of human life. But when Spider-Man discovers his plan, he's forced to inject himself and mutates into his final form. He's about to gobble a bunch of civilians when he's suddenly interrupted by visions of his son, his wife, and his old self. These illusions distract him enough for Spider-Man to inject him with yet another cure and defeat him. It's a lukewarm victory
shot was
at best.
nice.
While the cure significantly weakened the lizard, it failed to turn him back, and the hope of Connors ever returning is lost. At the very least, no one
he's
got hurt,
gone.
and the lizard is dropped off at the raft. That's where Dr. Octopus is. If there's one thing I like about this era of Spider-Man, it's that it always felt like it was building up to something. There'd always be forces at play behind the scenes, or elements that would be introduced only to pay off like 40 issues later. And all of these things eventually led to the series' grand finale, Amazing Spider-Man issue 700. It's time for Otto Octavius to take his last breath. But before he does, he has a final master plan. While Spider-Man may have saved the world a bunch of times, he kind of fucked up in a big way. To stop the Octobots, he plugged his brain into Otto's system. To cure Spider Island, he plugged his brain into Otto's system. Even when designing his spider armor, he integrated Otto's system into the helmet. This whole time, he's been giving Otto access to his mind. Using his psychic connection, Otto's been controlling a single Octobot, slowly crawling from the ocean floor all the way back to New York. It finds Spider-Man during a battle, and, using all of the brain data Otto's been collecting, completely rewrites Peter's brainwaves with his own, effectively swapping their brains. And so while Peter is now stuck in a decrepit, dying body, Otto Octavius is now free to do whatever he wants as Spider-Man. His final way of cheating death and getting revenge against his greatest enemy. As he coughs up blood and his organs start to fail, Peter prays to God and asks what he possibly could have done to deserve this, begging not to die in a place like this. With not much to do, he speaks to the lizard in the next cell along, who reveals that the cure worked, and that he's now 100% Curt Connors on the inside again. Peter urges him to tell someone, but Curt would prefer to stay trapped in his cell, as punishment for what happened to his son. He only told Peter because he's got hours to live and his secret will die with him. Okay, but he's Spider-Man. He's not just going to give up and die. So what the hell is he going to do? Well, if Otto has access to all of Peter's memories, then it works the other way around. Peter searches through all of Otto's knowledge and experiences, his contingency plans, secret bases, certain memories of Otto and Aunt May on their wedding day that makes you want to bleach out your eyes. Eventually, Peter makes the same psychic messages received, and he's then broken.
Go back. Being such a fuddy-duddy. Oh no.
Eventually, Peter makes the same psychic connection with the rogue Octobot, and uses it to call his fellow supervillains for help. His message is received, and he's then broken out of the raft by Scorpion, Hydro Man, and the infamous Paste Pot Pete. Meanwhile, what is Otto up to in Spider-Man's body? Well, he's arranged a date with Mary Jane, but it's very clear that he wants more than that. I can't tell if it's meant to be intentionally funny, but as she's getting closer and unbuttoning his shirt, he's saying things like, "Excellent! Another victory for the Master Planner!" Finally, Peter and MJ get back together, and it's Dr. fucking Numbnuts Octavius in his body. If you think about what's actually going on here, it's really fucked. But thankfully, they're interrupted by a news alert. Realizing that Peter will be coming to get his body back, Otto does the incredibly smart move of booking a round-trip flight to Belgium, thus ensuring that Peter will never be able to reach him, and by the time the plane lands, Peter will be dead. Meanwhile, Peter's life is in the hands of Paste Pot Pete, as the villains try to reattach his metal arms to his body. In doing so, they accidentally kill him, and Peter is transported to the afterlife. It's there that he meets his dead parents, George Stacy, Gwen, Tim Harrison, real ones no, and finally, Uncle Ben.
No.
Ben delivers a powerful speech about how proud of him he is, how Peter's built such an amazing life which he can't let Otto destroy, and encourages him to get back up one last time and fight. Back in the real world, Peter wakes up, ready to get his body back. But none of that matters, because Otto is about to leave for Belgium, and so the saving grace, the hero who saves the day, is not Spider-Man, it's not Pastepot Pete.
Is it MJ?
It's in fact J. Jonah Jameson.
Oh.
While being interviewed about the breakout, Jameson calls Otto a buffoon, a loser, a complete imbecile who's never actually accomplished a single one of his evil plans, and it is that one speech that makes Otto reconsider the flight and face Peter himself. Peter breaks into the police precinct where all of Otto's old equipment is being stored. He steals one of Otto's mind-swapping Octobots and is about to make a merry getaway when he's confronted by Carly Cooper. Peter tries to explain that it's actually him and that he's stuck in Otto's body, to which she's like, "No, that's dumb," and shoots him point blank. No! Her bullet ricochets off of Peter's arms and hits her instead. After
not good!
Carly's wound and praying that she'll live, Peter and the villains go back to their secret base. Returning from the airport, Otto has rounded up all of Peter's loved ones in Avengers Tower, just in case the evil Dr. Octopus comes after them for their connections to Spider-Man. We've got Mary Jane, Aunt May, Jay, Jameson, the Daily Bugle, the guys at Horizon Labs. Otto also snitches to the police of the whereabouts of Dr. Octopus's secret base, and an army of publicly funded Spider Slayers are deployed to take Peter out.
Not
Peter,
the Spider
Scorpion,
Slayers.
and Hydro Man escape, leaving poor old Pasty Pete behind. And if this scene was a kick in the balls, it gets even worse. When they're alone, MG confesses to who she thinks is Peter, that she's always loved him, no matter what happened between them or whatever fucking devil deal they've gone through, to which Otto responds by making out with her. Using his secret Avengers passcode, Peter enters Avengers Tower. If he can show someone like Iron Man the Octobot, then they'll understand what's going on and be able to help Peter get his brain back. Unfortunately, Otto has already thought of this, and has activated his massive Octobots all across the globe, leaving the Avengers occupied and no one at home to help. Not even Squirrel Girl. It is then that Otto accidentally lets slip that J. Jonah Jameson is in the building, piquing the interest of Scorpion and Hydro Man, who ditch Peter for a chance at revenge. Using his watery powers, Hydro Man discovers Jameson and his loved ones, only to be sucked up and contained by Horizon Labs and their power of science. Scorpion breaks into the safe room and they're like, "Well, science can't save us now," and they all prepare to die. But Jameson stands up to the Scorpion, claiming full responsibility for what he did to him in the past, and sacrificing himself so that the others can get to safety.
That's a real man right there.
Action, however, Otto leaps in and uses that raw indomitable strength to take Scorpion's jaw clean off. With literal minutes to live, Peter grabs Otto and throws them both out the window. Now that Otto is significantly weakened, Peter activates the special Octobot and begins the mind transfer. But just like
this is a roller coaster,
Otto has already thought of it and came prepared. Otto uses the same raw strength to take Peter out, and Peter lies beaten and broken, seconds from death. Sure, his plan may have failed, but that Octobot managed to get into Otto's brain just the tiniest amount, leaving the tiniest psychic connection between the two. When Peter's whole life flashes before his eyes, he uses this connection to share the experience with Otto, and the two are flooded with all of Peter's memories and the values he's carried throughout his life. The kindness instilled into him by Aunt May and Uncle Ben, the importance of never giving up no matter how difficult things get, how tragic it is to lose someone and learning to move on despite it, the meaning of true love and how you don't truly appreciate how valuable it is until it's cut short, saving Otto's life despite all that he did. Otto is overwhelmed. From his perspective, he is Peter Parker. These are all things that have happened to him, and the reminder of all of this completely shifts his philosophy. As the icing on the cake, Peter tells him that with great power, there must come great responsibility. Peter takes one last look at his loved ones, makes Otto promise to keep them safe, and with that, Peter Parker dies. This was of course very controversial at the time, and rightly so, killing off their main character on Stanley's birthday.
What the heck? There's no way they did this! There's no way that this happened! I mean, it was kind of beautiful if you think about it, like just the trials and tribulations I had to go through, you know, just in this one storyline right here, but still, they just kill off Peter like that?
But to me, this is almost a perfect ending
I
for
kind of
Peter
like
that
it though.
represents who he is as a character.
Right.
For most of his life, Peter was never rewarded for his heroics, nor was he able to really tell anyone what he was doing.
Right.
He simply did it because it was the right thing to do, and that was more than enough. Peter does not get a happy ending. There's no reward at the end, and he dies as a villain, with no one to mourn him, no one to celebrate his life or acknowledge his sacrifice. To most people, this would be the worst fate imaginable, but Peter doesn't care. Even though he's utterly defeated, even though he could easily give up and rest, he spends his last moments trying to find the good in someone, and he dies perfectly content with the knowledge that he's done the right thing and that his loved ones are safe. He's brave, selfless, and full of hope.
And that's the word that I feel like defines him the most, is selfless. And seeing him go out like this, even though that probably pisses a lot of people off because, you know, just killing a major character like that, just in general, makes people mad. You know what I mean? Think of The Last of Us 2, right? But the way that he went out here just makes me love Spider-Man, Peter Parker, even more. He went out not having to be the hero, not having to have all the recognition and clout from saving people and doing the right thing. He just knows that he did it. You know what I mean? He just knows that, hey, I did it because it was the right thing for me to do. And that's all that matters. I don't need all the rewards and all the benefits from doing such things.
And so as Peter Parker is laid to rest, Otto Octavius takes his place and promises to be Spider-Man. A better Spider-Man. Some could even say a superior Spider-Man.
Ah. Okay, that video was a lot. There was a lot that happened in the Spider-Man history. I think the clone era was where I was just kind of like, my mind was jumbled. I was just trying to understand everything that was going on with the cloning and such like that, and the other Spider-Mans and people dying and coming back. But I feel like this Spider-Man comic just solidified why I like Spider-Man even more. And seeing the ending, seeing Peter Parker actually die in the way that he died, yeah, it was sad. Yeah, it kind of sucks to see such a great person and such a great superhero go out, just in general. The way that it was written, I feel like, was beautiful. Seeing him go out in a way where he doesn't necessarily win, as in like, oh, you know, I get the massive rewards, I get the girl, I get the money, I get the clout, I get the fame and all of that. It was just, hey, I did all that I could do. I saved everybody that I could save. You know, I'm the best hero of all time for sure. I'm tired. And, you know, maybe I need to pass this to somebody else, pass the torch finally. And I don't need all of the benefits and rewards from anything because I already received those. Because just doing good in the world and, you know, accomplishing all these good deeds and such and making other people happy and saving them is all I needed. And I love that. I think that's amazing that he was able to go out with that thought in mind. And yeah, Spider-Man is just crazy, man. Like, there's just so many things that other pieces of Spider-Man media could touch on. And I feel like they just never do. That's my thing, is like the cinematic universe. That's what I grew up with, right? But I just feel like we get the same stuff. They just reboot the same goddamn story. I've seen the origin story about 20 goddamn times. I mean, it was kind of nice to see Andrew Garfield and the Amazing Spider-Man and them actually showing us Gwen Stacy and then having Gwen Stacy die and whatnot. But still, it's just like, come on. I'm sick of rebooting Spider-Man in the cinematic universe. Find a good Spider-Man and let this boy grow up. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see all the greatness. I want to see the Gwen Stacy's dying. I want to see the Mary Jane, and then Mary Jane runs away for a while, or she ends up not marrying him. I want to see Spider-Man finally die. You know? Like with the comic books, it's cool because they can continue to write them and write them and write them. And they don't have to worry about actors or actresses going, oh, well, we are done. I don't want to do this anymore, et cetera, et cetera. We got to go do, you know, get another actor and then reboot the series. They don't have to worry about all of that. So they can continue on with the storyline until it's finished. But man, I really wish we could finally get like a decent ending to some superhero story here, man. Somewhere. I hope that if we don't get it in the movie verse, we get it in the video game verse. Like, Insomniac's doing amazing with Spider-Man currently right now. We've played Spider-Man 1, we've played Spider-Man Miles Morales, and we've played Spider-Man 2 currently, right? And we're waiting for Spider-Man 3 to come out eventually, maybe in the next 4 to 5 years. That one will come out, and it should be groundbreaking, and we might see Peter Parker die in that one. We actually might see him die and pass the torch over to Miles. And I feel like Insomniac has done a pretty decent job of giving us a story that we can all like and cherish together. I feel like, you know, it has its flaws, of course. Nothing's perfect, but you know, they're doing their best. And I know like a lot of people don't like some of the quote unquote woke stuff and stuff like that, like the representation. They don't like Miles Morales, and they don't want to see Miles Morales as the main Spider-Man and stuff like that. But it's just like, come on, y'all. Like, it would be finally nice to see Peter Parker die. I'm not saying like I want to see him die, like he should die. I hate you, Peter Parker. I love Peter Parker, but I want to see him go out, man, or maybe just move away or something like that. I don't know. You know, just give up his job in general. He doesn't have to necessarily die, but pass the torch on to someone else that he feels like could carry on his legacy. And I feel like Miles could do that. So we'll see in the next Spider-Man game if Miles ends up being the new Spider-Man. And I know people hate to see that. It's dumb. It's, oh man, they're pandering, stuff like that. I like it. I think it's dope. And I'm kind of glad that they're going with that spin and that angle. But this was great to just see the roots of Peter Parker. And I feel like the reason why I'm talking about the Insomniac game is they kind of done a pretty good job of capturing what I was seeing today with the Peter Parker in the comic books. I want to really read that comic book that was dark, where he was, it was him and Mary Jane, and he was talking to Mephisto to get Aunt May back. I want to read that one because he said it was bad, like people didn't like it, but it was really well written in a way, like kind of good in a way. And I kind of want to read that one and just kind of see how it is, because I really do like things that go against the grain, that upset people and such. It's not the stuff that everybody wants. It's kind of like, you know, trying something different. So it would be kind of interesting to see like how dark it gets and how deep it gets with his relationship with MJ and such, because I get interested in that kind of stuff. But yeah, we saw the trials and tribulations of Peter Parker here today, and it was kind of great to see how it all began and how it ended. Thank you guys for following me and hitting the like button on the videos and subscribing if you haven't already. And on top of that, check out Alex, because we watched his Batman video. That was insanely good. This Spider-Man video was crazy good. He did so much work on this video. Like, he researched a lot. You can tell. He even said it in the video. He read so many comics. He used the wiki. He was utilizing all the resources possible so he can make us such a great video for people like me who haven't read the comics and probably never will read all of the comics like he did. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have an amazing day. Peace.
Hope will never die.
Órale.